Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. It's May 23rd, and this is our another SIG CLI meeting. I think we don't have done many topics, but let's go shortly through all of them. So, two announcements. So, in between the last time that we spoke and today, the SIG release actually managed to extend the code slush and code freeze dates by a week. So they moved to May 29th and June 5th accordingly, which means we have additional week to crank some code into 1.11 release. So I hope that extended period of development will become useful for everyone. And but that also means that the entire queue is so stable. So congratulations and thanks to every single person that devoted their time to maintain the tests flakiness at a very low level. Which brings us to the next topic, the test grid. The person that was looking after the tests over the past 2 weeks was Juan. So Juan, can you give us a short update on that?
Sure. So for the most part, there's been a few flakes, mostly due to timeouts happening. So regarding those, I've either linked a few issues on the log, if you take a look at the testing playbook, which I linked. There have been two incidents where we've actually just had highly recurring test flakes, and so those have been noted in the basically in the failures section at the bottom of the testing playbook. Here, I will paste a link to the playbook itself, and I'll paste it in the chat as well. Also, I've gone ahead and updated the test coverage. We've gained 3 or 4 new packages. For the most part, coverage has remained the same or improved a little bit, and yeah, that should be it. The single item that is recurring at the moment is the E2E COPS AWS failure. This, I believe, is just due to a timeout that occurs while fetching those from the server, and I have pinged Justin and basically highlighted on the open GitHub issue that this is still occurring. So yeah, that should be it for my update for testing.
Okay. The next person taking over the test cop duties will be actually me. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, about that. At the top of the testing playbook doc that you just saw a minute ago, we have a sign up table. So if you want to be a testing cop for one of the next timeframes, feel free to add your name to that list. So far, we have people sign up all the way till beginning of July, which is very good. And thank you thank you a lot to every single person that signed up there. Okay, so now we can go actually to the main topics. We have 3. Let's start with the simplest one that I put here because I want to start the discussion about the exit codes for commands. I've linked there are 2 issues that brought me there. One is about the kubectl apply command, and the other one was about I can't remember the other one. What was it about? But it was basically after checking one of the airbags. Yes, on auth, on kubectl auth, can I? The person complaining would like to see a exit code, non-zero exit code, whenever he's not allowed to perform some action. The same applied to kubectl apply, which is the other issue. There, a person would like to see a non-zero exit code, some standardized exit code for the cases where apply did not perform any changes. I'm guessing that particularly for apply, that will be a little bit harder given that we are currently in the works of moving apply to the server. But what I think is worth discussing is the general approach to the error codes that we return from the kubectl commands. Currently, the only time that we will return a non-zero, and not even that is the case, is when a command fails performing an action. That will be either connecting to the server, getting resources from the server, or invoking some operations on the server, or opening files if some are passed over to the command. This is a good starting point. What we need to ensure is that every single command is consistent with this approach, that it actually fails and returns a non-zero code for failed actions. The question is how other people are feeling about the ability of returning non-zero codes for results coming from actions. One of the main reasons for including such functionality was to be able to script kubectl commands more easily with the return codes rather than parsing the output of the command. So I'm very curious what others think about this approach.
So I think that, I like it, I'm on board with it, and I don't think we'd have to worry about backwards compatibility that much, because if people are already parsing the output, then I would not really expect them to be also checking, for a zero exit code status that they currently see. So adding an exit status of 1, for example, would, I don't think would be detrimental to any existing scripts.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is Antoine. If we look at what happens in like tools in POSIX, we usually have grep, for example, which fails if nothing is found. We have diff, which is going to fail if a difference is detected. So it's very common for these tools to return exit errors if something specific happens, which is not an error. So I think it makes sense for kubectl to return non-zero. Well, it makes sense. Not necessarily if an error happens.
Are there any other options, opinions that we should pursue this topic, or it's not worth the shot? Okay, I'm hearing none, so I think that slowly, as soon as we'll be done with cleaning kubectl, we can slowly pursue this option of returning non-zero codes, and that will also simplify the scripting. And something that I'm always looking towards is the Unix philosophy of the command for CLI. So I think that was pretty fast. Let's move then to the second topic. Last time, Matt Farina mentioned survey results from the SIG apps that they performed some time ago. So Juan went through the results, and we extracted only those that are applied for the kubectl command specifically, and I'll let Juan summarize the docs itself.
Sure. So if you take a look at the actual survey sheet, so question 1 basically focuses on whether or not people use kubectl, and for the most part, we did see that it is widely used. So the second question after that is, why do people use kubectl? And for the most part, the things I extracted from there the most were managing config, managing a cluster. People also use it to troubleshoot a cluster, particularly for obtaining logs for deployments or pods. They also use it to debug as well as monitor their applications. They use it to deploy and run apps. They also use it, and this was something I saw frequently, was they use it for kubectl apply as well as for proxying and port forwarding. And lastly, people use it for RBAC, particularly for managing permissions. So those items are the ones that stood out the most from the replies for this question. Oh, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to interrupt me at any time, by the way. The next question after that is, what's good about kubectl? The main point that stood out is that people like its simplicity and that it just works. The question after that said, or asked, what people would like to see added or improved in kubectl. The main points for that were that people wanted better consistency and predictability across options for commands. People said YAML is hard, and they want a better way to provide the spec for an object or to understand their current state of an application, for example, without having to parse through a single YAML object. People want better support for old versions. They want better filtering and sorting, particularly not using JSON path. So they want to, for example, provide a column name and be able to sort in that. And so this is a good point, since Maciej and I have briefly talked about this as well. I think it'd be a good improvement to do this. People want predictable output formats for all commands, particularly YAML and JSON. So they basically expect that any command that provides output is able to provide it in YAML or JSON as well. People also want command aliases. And by that, they mean, similarly to get, they want to the get command, they want to be able to alias describe, for example. So they want to be able to say cube space DESC, for example, and then whatever else. I believe this will be possible regardless once we improve our support for extensions and plugins. People might be able to make an extension that is simply, a shorter version of describe. So they'll name the extension DESC, and it'll just relay to the describe command. People also want the ability to switch between namespaces without having to specify the namespace for every single command. So they want something like kubectl config set namespace. Currently, they're using a tool called kubectx, I believe, which does this for them. But I don't see any reason for us not being able to include this subcommand in kubectl. People want better piping across commands as well. So if there's any cases where the output of one command cannot be piped into another kubectl command, we should identify those and basically make the whole thing consistent. People are also asking for a who am I command. So OpenShift has something like this. You're able to specify who am I as a subcommand, and it's able to tell you your username, the current server that you're talking to, and a token, if you have a token. So I think kubectl could benefit from this as well, so I agree. People want better third-party resource support. They want specifically CRDs to be treated as first-class citizens, or as close to that as possible. They want a better installation and upgrade process for kubectl. So for that, I'm imagining better support via package managers, for example. They want a cheat sheet for kubectl. So maybe an interactive site or documentation that people can provide a keyword and they can get all commands that fit into the keyword. Or maybe we can categorize commands based on utility or specific set of actions that they perform. Also, people want better documentation and organization of supported outputs. So I believe this fits in with basically they expect that every single command that outputs something supports YAML or JSON. And last, people want callers as well as plugins, better plugin support for kubectl. So that takes care of that one. Basically, for the template engine, people just either said yes or no. For the most part, there was some disagreements as to how people feel about the current templating engine, which is GoTPL. They're complaining that it's difficult to use, arcane, hard to get into. Some said it's easy, so there's mixed feelings in there. But overall, I don't foresee us changing our templating engine, at least in the near future. For the next two questions where people are rating basically the ability to visualize objects that make up an application, the answers to this were mostly varied between sometimes and usually, so people do want a way to visualize these. So although there's a web console they can use for this, it'd be nice to maybe have a way to give users dot output or something similar in the CLI. The question after that is fairly similar. So maybe the same could apply, dot output or some way to tell users the relationship among objects. And then final comments, you can see for yourselves, people are pretty happy with it so far. Should be it for the survey. If there's any questions, I'll answer them at this time.
This is Matt Freen. I'll jump in real quick. Thank you for going through all this. I'm glad there's some useful nuggets you could pull out of there. I also wanted to say, when it comes to grouping things and seeing it, one of the things SIG Apps is working on is the application CRD. In addition to that, and I can dig it out, there's a pull request on coming up with to document labels and annotation conventions to be able to tie things together as well. And so there may be some, to use the enterprise word, synergy between these efforts and maybe what kubectl eventually gets into and how something like that could come together. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure to cross-pollinate information.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to applications, I would rather kubectl become agnostic of any particular resource kind. What I'm imagining kubectl becoming is a generic tool that works the same way for the built-in types as well as the third-party resources, either defined through CRDs or through aggregated API servers. And that would be my goal, rather than focusing on specific application or particular convention. I do agree that the notion of application is important, but for me, as the person that will try to shape the kubectl more or less, I think I would rather focus on kubectl being a generic way of working with every single possible resource that is there.
I don't disagree. I guess the one thing that would jump in is a tool is part functionality, part convention, and a whole lot of experience. And so if folks want this, one way is to say is to use one of these other conventions and then or one of these other tools, and then here's how you can use that alongside of kubectl is kind of an explainer, because documenting and sharing and make it easy for people to discover how to do these things is part of a tool. When stuff isn't really documented or communicated, it becomes a pain point. And so that's when I think of something like this, maybe the application CRD does get into good shape and it is one of those things, and you can say, here's how you use that with kubectl to accomplish this task. Or maybe here's how you can use the recommended labels and annotations to accomplish those tasks with what you already have, but it helps people accomplish what they're trying to, which is, it's not always just about coding functionality. And I think that's one of the things I just want to make sure is clear.
Oh yeah, that makes sense, and that's actually boils down to what Huan and I were talking shortly before this meeting, which is improved documentation. Actually, some kind of a interactive cheat sheet map that will allow people to easier find the commands. We have so many different subcommands within the kubectl that currently, without proper completions, and I honestly I can't imagine anyone using kubectl without completions. But it looks like some people are. But even then, it is um, it is quite cumbersome to figure out where some commands might be hidden under which main subcommands. Because, for example, a lot of people complain that there is no option for switching context or verifying or updating contexts, where actually there is a kubectl config command which allows to modify the context. The other thing that people complain, and I think is worth adding, is the ability to manage the namespace you're currently working on. Because, for example, if you're working for a extended period of time with a namespace, the requirement to pass the dash name every single time you're invoking a command is becoming cumbersome. So we actually talked with Huan shortly before this meeting, and maybe we should extend the config command with the ability to set the current namespace, and that should simplify the managing and working with resources. That will also simplify the case where you're working with your app, because usually your application will be within single namespace, and that should simplify and improve the user experience, because a lot of people complain that they're invoking some commands within kubectl requires a lot of typing. This was the requirements for or a suggestions for git type aliases for some commands. Obviously, we are not managing the aliases for resources because these are coming from server, and I honestly don't want to work with that because that falls under the SIG API machinery area. But definitely, a aliases is something that we might be considering to, I don't know, for example, to invoke kubectl get commands, go all the way down to K, G, and then PO. That will could be a shortcut from kubectl get pods.
So while you're on aliases, I'm going to throw in, if you look at like Git aliases, right, it's not always just a shorter version of name. Like instead of get, you have the letter G. It can also be a whole length of multiple commands and information passed together.
Yeah.
That could be something. So I could custom define G to be get pods, and maybe even with some flags, and then that would then work as an alias. And so there's more than one way to think about aliasing here.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that's an open issue. I think that at some point in time, it's worth adding such a functionality inside of the inside of kubectl. I'm not sure about the installation process though, because usually the installation process is a thing that is owned by the distributions or by the vendors providing you kubectl. I know, for example, that whenever OpenShift provides the binaries for the server, along the way there are client binaries. Similarly, GCE, when you download the G-Cloud suite, you're getting a kubectl embedded within it. So the fact of improving the installation process, I think, is outside of the scope of this SIG. But definitely something around piping commands together so that you can actually get something and pipe it through to create is something that I would like to see being improved if if it's not happening. I know that the majority of commands should support piping currently, but I'm not 100% sure that it is the case. Does anyone have any other opinions, suggestions, or I don't know?
I'd say, I guess, short of going through every command we have and well, that outputs an object, for example, and seeing if it plays nice with other kube control commands, I'd say this is probably the most straightforward way of finding out if there's any inconsistencies and where they are.
Yeah, definitely improving consistency across the entire commands is something very important to start with, because I would like to see the fact that people like kubectl for being simple to still be true in the past. And the fact about improving documentations, what Matt also said about providing people with links to other resources, other tools that provide more rich capabilities is also a good one, because I honestly don't see any reasons that kubectl would be similar to kubectx, if I remember correctly the name, which is REPL type of a CLI, which maintains the current context up to the current pod that you work with, so that after you invoke get pod and you're invoking logs, it will autofill the pod name from the previous command. That's definitely something that I'm not gonna be happy seeing in kubectl. Honestly, I would like to see kubectl be simple as much as possible. Are there any other opinions, suggestions? Okay, so as a closing remark, I totally encourage every single of you to have a look at the doc. Maybe you'll figure out some other opinions out of these docs. So feel free to share with us next time during the meeting. The last topic, I believe, Sean, you added that one, is the SIG CLI governing charter. So take it away.
Yeah, just a quick note. We brought up the SIG CLI governing charter pull request last meeting, and we've allowed it to soak for the last couple weeks. And we'd like whatever feedback that you have, we're going to try to wrap that up relatively quickly within the next few days. And the next steps are that we would go to a particular steering committee member to try to actually submit this PR into Kubernetes community. The steering committee member who will be guiding our charter is Joe Beta. And so, yeah, please have a look at what is a formalization of the roles and the technical decision-making process for our SIG, and let us know your feedback within the next few days as we move to the next phase to actually formalize this charter, to get it accepted and to commit it into Kubernetes community.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you haven't seen the governing charter, it's not that long. It outlines the main objectives of our SIG, introducing some small changes that we will announce as well once the charter gets fully published. But feel free to look at it if you have any objections, comments, suggestions. feel free to leave a comment, and whatever you feel makes sense will be taken into consideration when approving this this charter. Are there any questions with regards to the charter itself? Okay, hearing none. So the last bit of our meeting is stand-ups. Let's start a little bit differently. Antoine, Sean, can you provide us an update on the server-side apply to start with?
Yes, we've just recently completed an end-to-end test, and we have some code in kubectl which is invoking this new patch endpoint. The kube Open API work is now being exposed in this pipeline, and the kube Open API stuff is going to be necessary in order to be able to do the merge. And so our initial fairly simple implementation is just doing a put instead of actually doing a real apply, where we just want to get a simple end-to-end working and then iterate on that. And we've just yesterday got a simple end-to-end. It actually returns an error. There's still a defaulting issue. I mean, so yeah, there's definitely quite a ways to go, but it feels good to be able to actually see this new command, kubectl alpha apply, which is how we think we'll start off with that, actually connecting to an endpoint and doing something. So what else? So we will be, I think, publishing a document to describe. There's one of the more complicated areas that we're going to have to deal with is conversion and defaulting, and how that happens throughout this pipeline. And it sounds like Daniel Smith will be publishing that. I'll bring that to our SIG so that it can get a wider audience. And I think that's about it, unless anybody has any questions. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much. And the next person will be Juan with an update on the refactorings that are happening in the kubectl.
Sure. So I'll make sure to paste some links on there for PRs that have merged or are in flight regarding this. But we are pretty much almost done with basically decoupling a lot of functionality that used to be in the factory to be either standalone or as helpers. So the main point of this is we see a future where commands don't need to depend on the factory to retrieve a client, for example, but would rather use the ongoing work we've been doing with the new config flags structure in order to basically obtain all they need. So to remind everybody why we're doing this is as part of an ongoing pattern to basically provide a sort of standalone repository with CLI tools that we dogfood ourselves, but also provide to third-party clients and extensions, so that we have a unified way of talking to. Well, we have basically a way to enforce a unified way of talking to the API. So yeah, we should hopefully be completely decoupled from the factory in the next week or two. And what that'll mean is we will basically take volunteers or victims to help us implement this pattern across every command, so that they no longer depend on the factory.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any stand-ups that I want to share with us? Okay, hearing none. Thanks very much, Sean. Thanks very much, Juan. Does anyone have any questions, topics that they want to bring up that were not put into the agenda?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Michael Gugino. I work for Red Hat and work on the OpenShift cluster lifecycle team. I was hoping to become a contributor member here, doing some moonlighting on the CLI, and just want to introduce myself. I have a small unit test PR out. It's kind of like a flare send up. So I just want to say hello.
Hi, Michael.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Michael. Want to share the PR number with us, either leaving the number here in the doc or in the SIG CLI Slack channel. That would be very helpful, and that will also ensure that people will look into it and help you get through the merge queue.
Yep, sounds good. I'll paste it in the Slack channel after this.
Awesome. If you have any questions or you would like to contribute to the SIG CLI, feel free to reach out to me or Juan or anyone present at this meeting. We will be more than happy to help you with get started or contribute more. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any topics, questions they want to bring up? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you back about 10 minutes of the meeting time. See you next time.